You grow a nice beard, Josh?
I can. Gentlemen, we are live. That was perfect timing. I'm here with John and Matt. You guys know them from Tour Edge Exotics, Hot Launch, everything else that goes along with the brand behind them. We are in our makeshift studio right now, not quite as nice as the one back there, but as you can see, there's nothing behind me. And that'll all change for Worst Golf Podcast that kicks off again next week. But we wanted to have these guys on because you guys got new products. We've upside down. Whoa. We've done a preview on each part of the line. We have reviews coming out on them. But when it comes to the new line, 720, I'll call it 723 for lack of a better everything. How excited internally are you? Not the marketing side of it, which, oh yeah, it's the great. How excited are you internally? Because this has got to be one of the bolder lines you guys have come out with.
Yeah, go ahead. Huge departure from, the way that it works at a medium-sized company like Tour Edge is every iteration, right? We take something from the last one and grow it up and try to improve it and learn from previous models. This was probably our largest departure from the last iteration to this one, where it was just like, hey, we got a whole brand new bevy of tech and ideas that we threw at this. And we still bring the diamond face over and face technology, but Matt can expound on this. I think the key that we wanted to with the metals was really hone in on adjustability and so we have the E and the C, as you know.
You don't say. I would never notice any adjustability on this.
C723 and E723 already segments the categories into your more of your players competition spec and then your extreme MOI spec. But we wanted within those divisions, we wanted there to be just as much adjustability as possible. This is some marketing jive here, but on the C723 driver head alone, because there's now a sliding weight track in the back, and there is a front and back adjustable weight that you can switch out. And then you take into account all the different weights that we produced for this head, and then you take into account the adjustable hosel. If you do the math on that, you literally have 4,860 different configurations with shaft not even coming into play.
Now, to be fair, you could have said anything, and we're like, yeah, that sounds right.
And I'm also shaking my head because there's probably not that many people with 220-gram weights in their C driver. The 40, it's a big number, but
it's called a matrix, Matt. And that's the matrix of the head. So it's a lot of adjustability. If you look around the marketplace, you're not going to see many drivers that have the front weight adjustability that you can swap out anymore. It used to be there, but now that they've gone away from it, and we feel that now we control up and down and sides as far as flight. So that's where the name Flight Tuning System comes from. Matt, why don't you tell them a little bit about how hard it is to R&D something like that, to get a new sliding track and how it actually helps dispersion and control of your spin and your MOI.
Yeah, for sure. So I
like this comment before Matt jumps in.
Okay, go ahead.
Phil says 4,000 excuses for me, and I like it.
Perfect. Yeah, to kind of add to what Claff said, so from 721 to 722, we made a pretty big leap in that. In 721, we kind of just had a whole C family. We had a set of E irons. Then with 722, we kind of increased our fitting matrix a ton by having a full lineup of C product and E product. And now with all the adjustability that we have in 723, we've kind of made that even easier. The real need for that heel toe adjustability, particularly on the drivers, came from a lot of our tour feedback as well as some of our fitters. But so the C lineup we kind of designed, we call the C competition. So the heads are a little bit smaller, kind of geared towards slightly lower spin. They're not like insanely difficult to hit or anything. It's not like it's a 300cc driver, but it's just a little bit smaller. And that's kind of the product that we focus our developments at for tour. That's the product that we plan on having play the most on tour. The E stuff is a little bit bigger. We kind of design it with a little more draw bias. So kind of more for Joe everyday golfer, a little bit easier to hit up in the air with some more spin. But
I feel like you're talking about me.
Yeah, we're talking about most people. And I mean, to be honest, from our, sales matrix, I think it's about 3-to-1 E to C. We sell a lot more E than C because we kind of design it for the everyday golfer. But in the E722 driver, despite it not really being for the tour guys, we had a lot of them really like the head shape. They really like the super high MOI. But because we kind of designed it with that little bit of extra draw bias, they were fighting that a little bit. They love it, but then they just would see that ball go a little bit too far to the left, a little bit too much draw, and tour players hate that when it's a little hooky. So we were kind of needing to play around with the drivers, putting tons of rat glue or hot melt out in the toe, and get some of those E drivers in play. So that was kind of where we said we could really use some heel toe adjustability. On our robot testing, we see about on the E driver around 10 yards left and right variability at 105 mile per hour swing speed that you can get. So, an actual 20-yard split that you can see between the left and the right. And then on the C, it's around 15 to 17 yards because the weight's not quite as heavy. The C weight has a 15 gram in the back and a 5 gram in the front. And the E driver has a 20 gram weight in the back. So you can see.
And you guys have a whole bunch of them, but I just popped a question up on the screen. Do you see a speed difference between E and C? Assuming all things, meaning loft and length, are the same, will you see a speed difference?
Yeah. So when we do our set robot testing, we of course run a gazillion different iterations. We'll run it with, the stock loft and the stock shaft setting. But then we, of course, will run tests where we make sure everything is identical, length, lie, loft, the exact same shaft. And between C and E, we see almost identical ball speeds. It's really, really close. Maybe I'd say about a 1/4 mile per hour drop off on E. We probably see that just because of the really high MOI and all the weight in the back.
Yeah.
But pretty darn similar. Now, I think the thing that we see on E that is pretty awesome is a bit less of a ball speed drop on off-center hits, and that's also just because of that MOI. I think on the E driver, we're right around 5,600 this year, which is the limits at 5,900. Getting much higher would require some more extreme design choices, like potentially going square, or adding some sort of we would make too many compromises to get much higher, and we kind of find 5,600 is the sweet spot for us not to start losing too much as far as either ball speed or swing speed goes due to making some kind of extreme design choices.
Yep. So. And then on C, just to round up the drivers, if we were to switch those weights, the 5 and the 15, you're getting 400 RPM?
Yeah, I think on the robot at 105, we see about 400 RPM of spin drop.
So this is a really fun thing.
Difference.
Anybody who lives in a windy area, right? You can just pop it out, do the switch, and you're hitting low missiles now on a windy day, just with one simple switch. So and your MOI is changing there too.
Yeah, I think we start around 5,100 with the heavy weight in the back on C, and then it jumps down to 4,800 when you swap the weights. So a little bit of a shift.
If you're feeling the juice, you just switch it out. Don't worry about forgiveness and just get that roll going.
Yeah, and we see pretty big. We see it's an interesting mix that we see on tour. Not everybody in C has the weight in the front. Some of the guys have it in the back, so it's a pretty even mix between who needs.
I threw something up on the screen. Thanks for sponsoring March Madness. This was the craziest March Madness we'd ever seen, and it's been really kind of fun to follow.
Yeah, it's been wild.
Yeah, I've been watching. It has been a lot of fun to watch. We love sponsoring that one. Just a little comment on Ridgeback. It's getting smaller and smaller, more refined, and really acting as an alignment aid. I think what was 15% thinner.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
this year. So that's the drivers.
Yeah, and I think something else worth noting on the drivers, probably the other biggest design change other than the flight tuning system, is going to what we're calling Ridgeback 360. So on 721 and 722 drivers, we had 2 pieces of carbon fiber that kind of, they were basically wraparounds that kind of wrapped around the entire heel and toe. We found that the Ridgeback was really helping a ton from ball speed, but we were losing a little bit from where we could put weight for high MOI. Because that extreme perimeter section of the golf club, to get high MOI, you want to move it as far away as possible from the center of the golf club. So that extreme perimeter on the skirt is a great place for us to get an MOI boost. So that was where we really saw our biggest MOI boost. We also see that it's kind of helped us on our ball speed on off-center hits. The Ridgeback was helping a lot, but then, it was really good for extreme off-center hits, but kind of something a little bit closer to the middle. We were kind of experienced, I think, a little bit of a more ball speed drop than expected. So by adding the titanium in a 360 around the full perimeter, we've also seen a little bit of help on our ball speed across the entire face. So
it's a brace for the face.
Brace for the face.
That's pretty good. You should be a marketing guy.
I want
to switch gears a little bit to the irons, because this is a pretty big departure from what Tour Edge has done. And I should preface this to the people following or that are going to tune in later and watch this. The three of us haven't talked a lot about this, but obviously C and E returned, but then there's another iron in there that kind of caught people by surprise. And then even another one in the prototype thing that I'm sure we'll never see in the wild. But I guess I shouldn't say that. They are available.
You're referring to the BL Proto set that that David Glod worked on with Bernhard Langer. It's a blade with offset. There's only 100 sets made. There will only be 100 sets available to consumers. They are currently moving pretty fast. We've gone through over a quarter of the inventory in the first few weeks. You get to pick your hosel. The hosel is stamped with a number, and everybody gets to pick. You actually get to go to the shop.Tour Edge and pick your number that you want on your hosel. So if it's your birthday or your lucky number or whatever, you can. It's a collector's item. So that's what people are buying.
That's kind of cool. I'd like an animal.
We don't even have that in here because they're all reserved for special collector sets. And but the iron that you are alluding to is the Pro 723 forged iron. This is the fastest adopted iron that we've ever experienced on tour. We had 6 total sets of exotics irons in play on the last Champions Tour event. There were 5 of these in play, and we only introduced it at the first event of the season in Hawaii. And Mike Weir instantly put them into play. So they do come in lefty. We also got Tim Petrovic and Kenny Duke on our staff plan, but now we're starting to pick up non-staffers, guys we can't mention. They're trying them on the range. They're putting them into play. 5 sets, I think, made us the number 4 most played iron model at the Champions Tour event last week.
And that's just that specific model. So I have a question, though. So when we got our set in, and James is currently reviewing them now, and you guys can wait for that review that'll come out soon, the first thing I noticed is clean, but then you look and you're like, okay, it's slightly larger heel to toe, but still a really small package. Was that the goal going in, to jump in and make something slightly larger? We've seen that, I'll say, in the game enhancement category, but not necessarily at the tour category. And I think it's kind of something that will catch on.
Yeah, for sure. I think so. That was like almost our first design brief. So we had our EXS forged irons, which were pretty awesome. I personally love those irons, but the overwhelming feedback, both from retail and on tour, and the reason those, we would always have a few sets in play. Tim Petrovic played them forever. Ken Duke, we had a bunch of them in play, but the reason we never got, past 2-3 sets, a lot of the guys just said it was a little bit too small. So that was kind of one of the big things. Like, can we keep that look of a player's iron, but give it that little bit blown up profile without, of course, looking too big, keeping kind of the super clean look. And that was, again, also the other thing was like, let's just keep it as clean as possible, show mill lines, but we also were able to slam our Vibracore in there, which I think, allowed us to go a little bit thinner on the face.
Show the top line they're requesting, John.
That could be a tough one.
Yeah.
To show, but yeah, pretty thin top line, a little bit thicker than EXS forged. I want to say it's like 9 millimeters.
Yeah, it's still pretty small.
So still pretty thin. But we were kind of, we do a ton of milling on these. The pockets on the heel and the toe, as well as that Vibracore pocket, move a lot of weight from kind of the center section that we're kind of able to redistribute to the kind of the extreme perimeter. So for being, a pretty clean, small forging, they're actually pretty darn forgiving.
It's amazing. What is it? 10%?
It's about
increase.
Yeah,
we did
10 to 15 across
the old EXS Pro, and you can barely see it when you put it down to each other, next to each other. But the 10% coming through with performance has just been mind blowing. So not only are these guys adopting these irons really fast, like we had one player who's a non-staffer last week who tried it literally on Tuesday. It was in the bag by Thursday. And the comment is just, this is everything I've been looking for. I mean, it's just that right everything. So everybody that's playing them is not only just saying, hey, they're not just saying, oh, I'm playing this iron, it's okay. They're saying, I freaking love these things. So this has been kind of the surprise of the year, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Now they're available now also.
Yep.
But I would say for the masses, the C&E line are going to be the bread and butter. Can you kind of walk through what the differences are between them?
Yeah, still a better choice for, the masses like you allude to. And we made the C smaller.
Yeah, the C just got a little bit smaller. I think, both on C&E, we made some pretty big changes, kind of to the overall head shapes and everything stayed pretty similar. But something that we changed on both was kind of moving away from a big, large Vibracore badge. So both E and C in 722 kind of had this big rubber badge that was right in the cavity. And it did a great job. It helped us out with sound and feel. But it also added a lot of extra weight in an area that we didn't really want it, because while it is rubber TPU, it's still, relatively heavy. It's not as heavy as stainless steel, but it still has a density that can add some weight. And in some of the E-irons, that badge, weighed around 15 to 20 grams. So kind of our goal was to help relocate some of that weight. So you'll notice on the E-irons this year, we've moved to this carbon fiber cap on the badge. So it's a super lightweight badge that basically just gets glued in place, basically makes it look like a hollow iron. But we're changing from a 20-gram badge to a 2-gram badge. So that's like an extra 18 grams of weight that we've had to redistribute around the head, getting the CG lower, further back, increasing MOI. And kind of the same story on the C iron. We got rid of the badge that was in the back. It's just an all metal cavity, similar to a lot of the players' distance irons.
They look really, really good this year in comparison.
Yeah, they're super clean. They really match up well. They're matching without being too matchy. And yeah, I think they turned out really nicely. And then of course, matchy. Yeah,
that's the technical term.
That's the technical term. Yeah, in R&D.
So I have a question for you when you're going through the aesthetics part of this, and you're going with matchy or, stamping of things and, having certain words placed certain places. How does the conversation go between R&D and marketing when it comes to making those decisions? And it's something that just popped into my head because I've always wanted to ask, and I have access to people and I've never really asked it.
They finally let us in the door recently. It's
You're welcome. You're welcome for that. I just want to say
it used to be a little more segmented. I would say, before I joined Tour Edge, we've done an incredible, a lot better job now of really having kind of an open dialogue between R&D and marketing now. So as we're developing things and showing what our R&D ideas, we're not coming up with names for anything because we're nerds that don't make up cool names.
I gotta tell a story to everybody because they're clueless about what I'm talking about. So in the Tour Edge office, there's this R&D section like every other company, and it's always been locked and closed off. And I used to tell John and some of the other people in marketing that one of these days you're going to be able to go in that room and you're going to find out it's like a speakeasy. There's lounge chairs and everything else, and there's no R&D at all. It's just like a private club.
That would be way better.
When you finally got to go in, you're like, no, it's really just R&D.
Well, what they don't know is the back door to the place actually doesn't really lock that well.
I know that.
No, but there is a new theory around here that there is an executive suite somewhere in the building because we were walking around looking for some of these guys, and their car's here. We know they didn't leave. They're not upstairs at the practice facility, so we don't know where they are.
We're hiding in the paint booth.
It's got that George Costanza desk with the pillow and everything underneath built in.
Yep.
I got to talk about marketing a little bit because last year too, to a degree, but if you're my age, which is pretty freaking old, Bo Jackson is Tecmo Bowl plus Hero rolled into one. How did that come about with Tour Edge? It's kind of funny. I considered John a pretty good friend, and I don't think I've ever actually asked that question.
Yeah, no, I don't think.
And what's it like working with arguably, Deion Sanders has a claim there too, the greatest athlete of this generation?
Yeah, so Bo lives in Chicago. He has since his White Sox days. He's a big force in Chicago as far as charities and businesses, and he's got his hand in a lot of different cookie jars in Chicago. But when Nike stopped making golf clubs, thank you, Nike. Bo came to us and said,
I was just going to say, he's right next to you.
Right. That's right. I forget.
I single-handedly shut down Nike.
Yeah. You made some good stuff, man.
Just for anyone who doesn't, I worked at Nike for 2 years, and then Nike unfortunately shut down. Not any of my personal doing. So.
Right. So Bo came to us and said, I want to play this local Chicago brand. He always played, I think, something of ours. He always had a 3-wood in or something. So he was familiar with us for years, and we were happy to help. Like we do with a lot of Chicago sports legends around here. They kind of flock to us. So we kind of befriended him. We became buddies. Bob Ochoa, our director of marketing, and we just started hanging out with Bo a little bit, and things progressed over time to where he was playing full bag. He became an official ambassador a few years ago, I think during pandemic, and we hit him up. We said, "Hey man, we want to run with this," and I got to tell you, he is the most down to earth celebrity or sports star I've ever met. I've met a lot.
Brian Bosworth doesn't think so.
Through golf. Oh, you should hear him tell his Bosworth story. It's classic.
I mean, at my age, that's still the carrying him in that is kind of legendary. The commercials have been really well received. They seem to be hitting the mark. Have you seen a trend in Bo having an influence, so to speak?
Very much so. So we had Bo at the end of our commercials last year, which is kind of like a cameo. And this year they're very Bo-centric and kind of, playing off of the, hey, we have 2 E and C. Which one are you going to choose? And Bo's saying, well, I'll just play them both, But so our next iron ad that's coming up about the 723 irons featuring Bo, we actually reference the 91-yard touchdown where he ran over Bosworth in it. Scott McCarron references it. So you'll be seeing that in a couple weeks. We have 6 total spots with Bo. The joke is that Bo is, Bo knows everything, right? So Bo's going to be playing on the PGA Tour. He's going after the Champions Tour. And so then our staff players on the Champions Tour start giving him advice. Well, you're going to need a good driver. You're going to need a good brand. And so we've really tied the room together with this year's campaign. We're pretty proud of it.
What do you think as the growth with the Champions and the TV ads now and a full line that has really kind of blossomed into something that's a pretty large line? What is the growth potential? The world is changing, obviously, but golf is still pretty hot. Is Exotics a brand that people are now thinking of with everything else? Is Hot Launch still, a dominant force for you guys? Where is Tour Edge overall?
Yeah, I mean, we saw growth in all 3 of our categories over the last 5 years. Exotics has grown exponentially. Hot Launch has grown quite a bit. Obviously, our Get in the Game series, our package sets, we were sold out for 2 years. That part is kind of dying off now, but Exotics is taking over for that loss that we're having, which is what you want as a golf company. You want the high margin stuff checking out. You want the low margin stuff being there to just kind of help pay the bills. But during pandemic, it turned into just this massive thing on starter sets and package sets. And we couldn't even keep up with it. There was 3 or 4 months delays and everybody was in line. Everybody needed them, but that has kind of gone away. So you're kind of seeing a return to normalcy now. And where I think all of our marketing efforts and our tour efforts have been streamlined into Exotics, it's really helping grow that to the next level, to where people are looking at us and the fitters are presenting us as the logical option to not spend $700 on a driver, spend, half that money, maybe a little bit more. You're getting the same exact performance. So that's where we're in the battles. We are priced right and we perform right, thanks to this guy and David Glott, obviously, who is still our chief designer. But our R&D team is the focus that we put behind R&D. It kind of matches what we've done with marketing as far as growing this thing up over the last 6 years. And I think you now have a team of 5 in R&D, which, it used to just be Dave, many moons ago. So, we've really grown this thing up, and now we're winning those battles at the point of purchase because you're saving money and you're getting exactly the performance that you need.
Before we continue, because I have an interesting question for Matt coming up in a second, we mentioned that there's going to be a contest, and there is. So when this show ends, you're going to go to the comments section and leave how many exotics drivers will be in play at the next Champions event. And we will announce a winner after that event, which is shortly after the Masters. I think it might surprise you, but we will announce that winner and send you a pretty cool prize pack. So again, when the show ends, post it in the comments section. Matt,
Yeah, I mean, do you want me to give any hints on past results, or is it just
No.
just make them do their own research? Okay.
Yeah, we've put out some news on that. They can find it. Okay. Matt, we've mentioned hot launch and box sets, and obviously, I think it's often missed that R&D goes into all products.
Yeah, for sure.
And sometimes R&D in a product that doesn't cost as much doesn't mean less research or development takes place.
Yeah, definitely.
What is the curve from a hot launch player? We have a lot of them who read our site, and James and Dean and Ryan have done good jobs explaining what those sets are and, you know, how they go about things. What is the curve for that person to move into exotics, or do they not and just stay with the hot launch line of clubs?
You know, it's totally dependent on the person. You know, I think once you get to the point where you're looking or needing potentially that adjustability, kind of wanting that, that's where you would definitely want to move from hot launch to exotics. You know, if you're finding that E driver is just a little bit too much draw bias, too much spin, you know, that would be a time to move up. But you could also move over to C, and you know, I do think people would be shocked at how well a C523 driver will perform on the robot, particularly when we put the same shafts that we have in our exotics product in it. It gets really, really, really close. The product is not bad. We just have to do a few things differently. We're not allowed to do as much internals in a driver, which just means, you know, maybe that sound isn't quite as crisp as what we can get in exotics, because like in exotics we can afford to add ribbing, we can afford to add some extra structure. On a C523 driver, that's just not an option due to the manufacturing methods, but we can still get the center of gravity where we want it. We can still get the faces, you know, darn near as hot. So, you know, while we're also able to use a lot of the engineering efforts and things that we do in the exotics range and kind of bring it on down to hot launch. A perfect example is kind of Viber Core. That's something that we debuted in our exotics irons, but we were able to find a way to do it in our hot launch irons and make those, you know, our C523 irons, I think are, you know, some of the better sounding, you know, just hollow one piece game improvement irons out there.
This is the biggest secret in the building right here.
Yeah, I mean, we have one
not really a secret anymore.
We have one of our VPs that could obviously play whatever Tour Edge product he wants, and he plays the C523 irons because he just loves them. You know, the head shapes look right to him. They perform really well. You know, so it's really good stuff as well. Just kind of designed.
Well, and spec wise, you're talking higher lofts. I mean, you can get a 9 and 11 wood and 523.
Speaking my language.
It's designed to get airborne and keep things easy, you know, point A to point B.
Now, you mentioned sound, and I'd be remiss if I didn't bring it up because I try to bring it up with everybody. Every brand has that sound, from, you know, the muted of some of their early carbon fiber heads to the god-awful shitty sound that Ping came out with last year. Sorry, excuse my language. The 723 is kind of different. When I've only hit a few of them, I've been a little under the weather if people can't hear it. It's different. I don't want to say good or bad. That's not me to judge. It's not super muted where you don't hear it, but it's not metallic in any way.
I was just out on the Palm Springs or the Rancho Mirage
Subtle Flex
Champions Tour event, and well, no, not really. It's just I noticed.
I mean, you left Illinois for Palm Springs. I would say that's a pretty good,
a pretty good deal.
It was pretty cool. But no, the thwack on the C is there. It's a little bit thwackier. But here's where I was surprised. We do have a couple of E drivers that play out there as well, and it is louder than the C. And Ken Duke turned to me and he said, after he hit one, he said, "God, I just love this sound." I was like, "Yeah, like tell me why." He's like, well, it's just attracting. It makes me feel powerful. I'm an older guy. I don't swing that hard. I hit everything straight. I hit fairways all the time. He goes, when I hear this, I feel like I'm stronger. And he said he has a bunch of guys planning programs with him that approach him and say, I want that sound. And because they just want to feel like they're hitting a cannon. And I thought about it. I was like, you know what? That makes sense to me.
Yeah, that's actually that's a perfect little tidbit, because that's actually kind of how we designed it. We kind of designed that driver to be a smidge louder, because we do get that feedback from out in the field that it is kind of nice to hear something a little bit higher pitched if you're, and a little bit louder when you're not swinging at 115 miles per hour. So the C is kind of designed to be a little bit thwackier than the E. But now that being said,
all swing it that fast.
Now, that being said, sound changes every year with what everyone's targeting. This year's really interesting, and especially with a lot more carbon fiber in some of these products, it seems like a lot of stuff is shifting to that really, really thwacky sound. So again, whether that's
patent that or copyright that, trademark that word, I think it could be pretty good in ad reads.
Thwackier,
Yeah.
You're gonna have to delete all this now.
Yeah, I mean, I already have a bumper sticker on my car that says "We thwack."
Interesting. That could be taken a lot of different ways. When you're doing testing and you're creating these drivers like you with E and C, and you're moving internal, people always think when you cut a driver open, it's just a big hollow thing, and that's just not really the case.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned, the rib design. What else can be done to alter sound?
So kind of your composition of the head. So whether or not you have carbon fiber in certain areas is definitely one way you can alter sound. Generally, something with more carbon fiber is going to sound a little bit, I'll just say it again, thwackier than something that doesn't.
In the comments, they're getting a kick out of the thwackier stuff.
Distribution of weight is another one. So usually something that we put a lot more weight forward in the head. Putting the weight a little bit more forward will usually get something a little bit lower pitched versus something back. So that's like interesting, even with the C driver. When you swap those weights, when you have the heavy weight in the back, it'll be a little bit higher pitched than when you put the heavy weight in the front. At least that's what we find. And then, of course, you also have the option of rat glue or hot melt. So we put hot melt in all of our heads, and we kind of have to find the exact location to put it. We don't put too much. It's around 1 to 1.5 grams, and it's kind of just designed, if anything is, if there's a, just to find a spot for it to, find just the right spot to put it to kind of get that sound exactly where we want. So we bring in a lot of, when we're in our R&D process, we bring in probably 4 or 5 different internal configurations when it comes down to the ribbing, because we have ways to predict it using our software, but sound is one of the most sensitive items. And even when we can predict things, it is really tricky to get just right there. So that's why we bring in, multiple different heads just to get it just right.
If that doesn't go on a shirt, then we're doing something wrong. Bow nose thwack. That is fantastic.
Oh, man.
When you get the final heads in, and we'll use these two as kind of the measuring stick, and you first get to swing them, what's the feeling? What's the sensation of, hey, this is super exciting, they're finally here? Is it nerves of?
Yeah, it's super nerve-wracking, to be honest, because we spend 6 months to a year in development of these things, and it just exists on a screen for a very long time. Of course, we have 3D prints, so we have a really good idea what it's going to look like. But so many of the performance, characteristics, particularly sound, are still, we're waiting to see if it's going to do what we've predicted on the screen. We're very anxious to make sure that when we go measure it on our center of gravity machine and MOI, that it actually matches up what we were able to do in the CAD. And the same goes for where we put the center of gravity. We have a really good idea where moving certain weight, like what that will accomplish, but we still have, the proof is always in the pudding. So we have to hit it. So it is usually very nerve wracking.
I've seen him sneak up there alone with for first time hits, and he does not have a good look on his face.
Yeah.
For those who have not seen our like kind of behind the scenes of their headquarters, you walk in the building and it's like an office building. That's kind of what it is. And then you can around where the room they're in, there's a staircase. You can go up the stairs, and it's pretty freaking cool hitting bay and stuff up there. You got everything you would want. You have every testing robots up there.
Yeah.
It's I can imagine the nerve-wrackingness. I don't know. Is that a word? Is there now? Take it a step further. What's the feeling the first time it goes into the pros' hands?
Also very nerve-wracking. Not as much, because we've usually at that point it's not a very first head, and we've had a chance to test it and hit it. So we have a good idea what it's going to do, but still, it's still very nerve-wracking because, so often these guys have a very specific idea of what they want a golf ball to do with the driver. So what we present to them might not be exactly what they are, used to or ready for. And they also, especially I keep talking about sound, it is so specific to, and it's really, our goal with sound is to be very good, and we need to avoid being offensive, because you can get used to almost anything. And a driver you mentioned
anything.
A driver you mentioned earlier was definitely
nobody's getting used to that. The defense mechanism to defend it is alive, but nobody's getting used to the sound of broken glass and not seeing Steve Austin come through a curtain.
And look, we're not perfect either. I can go back to our E521 driver was a pretty atrocious sound. I'll just say it that way. So we improved it.
I didn't think it was. I mean, not if the measuring stick sounds good to Sasquatch and G425.
Yeah, it wasn't
at that level. It was somewhere in the middle.
Level. Yeah, it's fine. Very aluminum batty.
But no, what I was going to say is that every year with the Tour Pros, we get more and more confident because not many people know this, JB. Our Tour Pros, most of them are on say a 2 or 3 club deal, and it does not define what club it is. So anybody playing our driver is not contracted to play our driver. So it's not like these guys are just being nice to us by saying, "Oh, I love this. This is the best driver I've hit." Like Scott McCarron does not have to play our driver. He's playing 723 because he loves it. And that's why we're kind of old school in that sense, where we have these guys on a contract just to be our billboards and have some to make commercials around.
Yeah, there's player validation involved.
But at the end of the day, we need to, prove every category to get in play. So every year it gets a little less nerve-wracking because we know that we keep raising the bar and we keep impressing these guys. So it's become a little easier to hand, somebody a driver and go, "Hey, this is going to be just as good."
Now, you guys have done some focusing on the Champions Tour, and we've talked about that in past shows about the reasoning, part of which is getting into PGA Tour bags is not always about how good the equipment is. There comes at a cost, and not just of sponsoring players, even being out on the PGA Tour range comes at a cost that would kind of blow people's minds when they start knowing that. With the Champions Tour, it's not as if you're out there sponsoring 20 or 30 guys, though. Yet I've seen quite a few numbers, I would say, that have a lot in play that aren't necessarily staff members. That was a long-winded way of saying that.
Since 2018, we have staffed a total of 9 different guys that have been paid in some way to represent Tour Edge. We have had over 150 PGA Tour champions put some kind of Tour Edge in the bag in that time. So there's your dichotomy. We're actually out there doing the old school, hey, let's try to sneak a hybrid in this guy's bag, even though he's on a 10-club deal. Or this guy fell in love with our 3-wood. Let's make sure we think stays in the bag. This is what it used to be like out on the big tour. It is not like that anymore. If you have a marquee player and he's with Callaway, he's with Callaway. He can't touch anything else. So it's changed. And so we're out on an even level playing field, proving ourselves, and putting feathers in our caps every freaking week. And I got to tell you this stat. This is the one that has kind of surprised me, even the guy who studies the Darrell survey more than anybody. 723 hybrids and fairways. When you look at that category, the model, we have become in only 5 events the number one played fairway and hybrid model in C723. Number one.
That's pretty impressive.
There's a lot of, so when you look at all the different models that are in play by the big boys, there's still people playing Rogue. There's still people playing, you know what I mean? It takes a while to get everybody caught up to the new models. Well, this C723 has got serious legs because we have already jumped to either tied or number one model in play for fairways and hybrids. It's just crazy.
I wouldn't be doing my job as, I don't know. I don't even know what you call me, journalist. I don't know.
I don't know what to call you either.
I know. I get a lot of choice words. So
just JB.
A large story in golf right now is about rolling the ball back. And you guys don't make a golf ball, so I feel safe asking this. Where do you stand? Not on rolling back the equipment. I think I could pretty much guess where you stand on that. On why this is going to do absolutely nothing.
Well, it's a slippery slope to even comment on it, right?
Not for a marketing guy.
A guy who is in the ball business, especially. I understand why Titleist wants to protect Pro V1, right? If Pro V1 is now something that the pros play, but the local rule makes it something different, you lose that juice. I mean, that the whole model that they're built on, why there's so many people playing Pro V1 that just worship Pro V1, right? You lose that connection. So I understand it, but also I kind of, from a manufacturer's standpoint, it's like, hey, you got different SKUs that it's gonna split probably the market in half, where you're gonna make more. You may sell more golf balls in the process. So I'm sure it wasn't an easy thing for these guys to sit down and go, what's more important, our marketing tie-in or the amount of units that we can move? But at the end of the day, that marketing tie-in is pretty big. And nobody wants to lose that.
Do you genuinely think, though, as a person who's been around golf, the two of you both, for so many years, that taking 15 yards off of a guy who's hitting it 330 matters at all?
No.
I mean, half these guys don't even hit driver on most holes.
It's one of the players on Champions that really came out in favor of it was Patty. And he had some good points that
because he's been playing inferior equipment for years.
But he's the longest guy out there, and he's the longest guy on Champions Tour, and he said it's fine. So go read what Patty said about why he supports it, and you may get some insight on, speed of play came into it. But
that is a big part of it, and I've seen that brought up a couple of times where, every par 5 you're waiting for a green to clear. There are par 4s you're waiting for a green to clear. I get all that, but speed of play has never been a concern by any of these governing bodies in the past, to the point where they're actually going to do anything about it. So I think that's a nice byproduct. Now, going back to your equipment before we let everybody leave and we bring this back to the forum, if a person is going into a golf store and they see these two heads sitting there in front of them, 723 C&E, is there you should hit this one versus this one, or is it try them both because you don't know where you're going to fall into?
So I would say for majority of people, I'd probably start them with an e-driver. And if you're just seeing a little bit too much spin, then you should try the C. But the E is probably the one that's going to be designed to fit 75 to 85% of the average Joe golfer. And again, that's not to say that this C driver is this monstrous product that's like nothing. It's nothing to be afraid of. It's not that hard to hit. And some people might even just prefer the slightly smaller shape of C. But I think from a standpoint, if I were fitting somebody, most people, I would probably start them with an e-driver and see where they fall there. Of course, in an ideal world, you should hit both. But I think most players, if you have a higher swing speed, if you're swinging over 105 miles per hour, then maybe you would start with a C driver. If you're under 105, then that's probably starting with an E driver to give you that little bit of extra launch and spin help.
The E is so forgiving and so straight that it's going to improve your speed of play by 20%.
I love that. Wow. Okay, so final question. Which one is it? Give me a what's in the bag on drivers in your current bag for each of you.
I've got a C driver in the bag with the weight in the front.
I don't have my new set yet. I was out with surgery last year, so I'm going to be playing my first round of golf in a year and still need to decide, but I believe I'll be playing the E723.
I love it. Well, guys, thanks for joining us. Remember, when this show is off, jump into the comments and predict how many Tour Edge drivers are in play at the next Champions event. And I'll get that number from John in the Daryl survey afterward. And we will announce a winner and send them out a prize pack. John and Matt, thanks for joining us as always. And we look forward to having you guys on again.
Thanks,
Josh.
guys. Thanks.
Had fun.